You have learned quite a lot from me over the time we have spent together now, have you not, my ward? All the clans, the bloodlines, and even the sects, although I have one more of those to discuss for now, and it is one that makes me feel... ugh. Their very nature is confusing, and that's partly by their own design, given their trend for secrecy. Today I wish to speak of a sect, or perhaps it's two sects. Let's just say 1.5 for now. They call themselves the Tal'Mahe'Ra, or True Black Hand, but there is another group that just call themselves the Black Hand that are within the Sabbat. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself already. See, I need to go back and talk about where this group came from, its ancient histories, for they are quite old. And I will need to talk about this history before you can even comprehend their structure. The group is ancient in its origin, prehistory by many accounts, but of course this was not really the same organization I wish to speak of today, but a proto-version of them, made up of a handful of kindred, primarily of the Assamites as we called them at the time, but also the Lupines and a handful of the Fae. But the group was primarily comprised of and ran by human mages. To sum them up as quickly as possible at this point in time, they were a death cult obsessed with the notion of the afterlife, and in all fairness they did have many ways of accessing the spirit world as it is known, and many of them often took visits there. They worshipped a cabal of gods called the Aralu, who are said to be slumbering in the spiritual remains of Cain's first city. Alright, I should probably get into that. See, some places and objects can be so powerful and important that their destruction will have a presence in the spirit world, or afterlife, depending on who you're talking to, upon their destruction. This is not a soul per se, or anything like that, it's merely the world reacting to the change in our own. So when Cain's creation, the first city Enoch, was destroyed, it made a sort of version of itself in the spirit world, and those of them that could visit it tended to hide within it. This is also where their gods, the Aralu, are said to be, and their identities are highly debated, some thinking they are actual gods or ancient mages, possibly slumbering antediluvians. It does not matter to me, for I doubt they are real. The group in this form, however, fell apart due to infighting. Those who were not kindred or mages died very quickly in these wars, and in the end, it was only the kindred who remained, and they split themselves into two groups, those that went east and those that went west. And before you start to think this now makes a little more sense, no, no, it's not related to the modern groups at all. They later came together and split apart again and again and again. I'm not going to track over all of the versions that were created and how it shaped their current worldview, because it didn't really do any of that, and they don't really deserve it, if I'm being honest with you, the old versions, that is. See, the last time they were together as one group, it's what gave them their current name, the Tal'Mahe'Ra, and they began to do the thing they are now so famous for, the subversion and spy work, to take over every other sect from within, because of course they do. Any sect that's losing, or group that dreams of becoming one of the major ones, will often do this. It's why the Ministry tried before their little rebranding. At least with them, I'm not sure what they're currently planning, which makes their attempted subversion fun at the moment. Sure, I know they're doing it again, I just don't know how they plan to do it yet. With the Black Hand, I know exactly why they are doing it. It's for the exact same reason. World domination, of course. We kindred can be so bloody predictable at times, and the Black Hand are no different. They, however, typically target those on generational lines. What I mean by this is they will go after one who is, say, one step away from being something greater. If they were one generation lower, they would be considered elders and the like. Then they change this fate for them. They offer them to become one. Of course, they have to join their little secret society to do so. But because of their secrecy and how they go about doing things, they've now gained the reputation as a secret society of sorts, one that has some actually powerful figures to their name. They claim to have at least a dozen Camarilla princes as members, and hundreds of the lower titles too. And I would not be surprised if this is not a bluff, for I have once captured a traitor prince. But more on them later. For now I wish to speak about how this bit them in the arse. See, them doing this is what formed the current famous offshoot we simply call the Black Hand within Sabbat. They're one of the many subgroups under the greater Sabbat umbrella, and were originally formed by the Tal'Mahe'Ra to serve as spies and informants. But Sabbat do what they always do, and hate authority. Over time, they turned and now serve their own wants. Or perhaps this is a ruse, and they are still loyal. And that's just what they want you to think. Or maybe they're actually in control of the Tal'Mahe'Ra. This is where it starts to get a bit fun. See, it's very common for one of this group to claim to be one of the other, and they even dress up and pretend to be one another. They claim admission towards their actions. Because of this, it's almost impossible to tell who is and who is not something they're claiming to be. Whose side are they really on? Are they Black Hand or Black Hand? Because of this, some elders question if they are actually two separate groups fighting, or one playing a very long and sophisticated game. I, however, don't think you would primarily fight yourself over and over again, more so than anyone else, if your main goal was to just trick those around you, especially if others don't even know about it. Someone from within this group is trying to kill another member of the group, that I know for certain. And since this is an in-group fight, I know of many Sabbat elders who will just roll their eyes whenever the phrase Black Hand comes up, and I think I would feel the same in their shoes. But I should get into how they are actually different. For a start, the Tal'Mahe'Ra will never publicly state they are as such. It's always hushed whispers and pieces of paper quickly exchanged in backroom meetings with their symbol on it. If you ask too many questions about them, you might find yourself in some trouble, as you'll be dragged away for being too much of a problem starter. On the other hand, you have the Black Hand, the one that's one of the Sabbat's many sub-factions, and they are very public, by kindred standards anyway. They will tattoo themselves and pump their chest. They act more like a military group, being often the first to act and attack when their wars start up, both internal and external. I should also mention, if I haven't already made it clear, that their goals are very much not aligned in the slightest. The Black Hand within the Sabbat do want the destruction of the Elders and the Antediluvians, while revering Cain just as the Sabbat clan proper does, while the Tal'Mahe'Ra want to serve their sort of gods, the Aralu, who are some Antediluvians, depending on who you believe, of course. Neither group have had many when it comes to their numbers, however, and prefer the more covert options with secrecy. For the Sabbat Black Hand, however, they're more like commandos, sneaking into rooms and slitting throats from the shadows, rather than shady backroom deals. Although remember, they will pretend to be each other, so do keep that in mind if you suspect any of their involvement. The Black Hand are also quite active when it comes to the many Sabbat civil wars, and believe it or not, they're not even close to some of the worst factions within the Sabbat, although they are far from the more, shall I say, stable factions in the Sabbat, the ones I can actually work with. But unlike the Tal'Mahe'Ra, we actually know somewhat how the Black Hand operates, for they have 4 separate leaders that they know as seraphs, who act on par to say a bishop, but a lot less religious, despite their angelic name. They will, however, follow orders given to them by a higher rank should they be ordered to, although this rarely happens, as many do not trust them as far as they can throw them. And that's because they aren't trustworthy at all. It's far too common for a higher member of their society to be escorted by a Black Hand pack to just go missing tragically, or they fail in their operation. I know it's so sad, but they will strive to do better next time. After all, this is only the 4th time this has happened. It won't happen again. Mind you, do not let yourself think that you can underestimate them. The commando analogy I said earlier probably is a good way to measure them. While many Sabbat follow the jihad and endless war as a background, a tool to achieve their end goal, the Black Hand are full-time militarists. They view themselves as warlike, as soldiers. Every action in society they take leads into their endless war they find themselves within, or they must at the very least hurt whoever their primary enemy is at the time. And if this guerrilla war between the two groups is going on as I believe it is, it seems that by far the Sabbat branch is winning, since the Tal'Mahe'Ra take such little action in comparison and are so few in number that some even think them dead. I do have quite good informants in this, but as always it's hard to pin down the truth when groups like this play the game. It's not impossible that almost everything I have said tonight to be misinformation. But as I said before, I have sniffed one of them out, and you don't live as long as I have without knowing how to do a little spy work of your own. How about I get into that, as I do believe it's quite a good way to tell with individuals like this, not just the Black Hand or any variant of it, but any group that operates this way. See, my role has me visiting many princes throughout the world, most of which tend to act as I would expect, with generous hospitality for one of my station, and I wish to speak of one who did in fact do so perfectly. His mannerisms were perfect, his stance was even how you should address an old king, and he even spoke in my native tongue when we first met, which was very impressive to me, since most couldn't even name it today. He showed me his operations and how it was all above board, and that was probably the first thing that gave away that something wasn't right, for he indeed had no real flaw in the eyes of the Camarilla. I was expecting him to secretly be a Diablerist of sort, but no, my agents confirmed that he'd only done so once. A perfectly acceptable number for a prince, I say. Not once after I had met him did he show that there was something wrong. Not once have I ever met such a perfect prince as them before. That's how I knew something was wrong. Until, of course, I found out what was wrong. During a gathering in an Elysium, while conversing with the many roses in the garden, he let one word slip that gave him away. While we talked about our kind, he said the word Cainite instead of kindred, the term the Sabbat used for our kind. Because of this, my suspicions were finally met. I sent one of my Nosferatu to do some more thorough searches, and they did not disappoint. They found out about an incident where this prince handed a Primogen a piece of paper with Black Hand mark upon it, and I knew then and there that he was Tal'Mahe'Ra. So I informed him that everything was in fact perfect, and that I wanted to return to their study, and asked that they summon this Primogen, where, upon their arrival, I staked them both. I keep them now with my other trophies, monuments to those who would betray me. Well, the Camarilla as a whole, but I took it personally. Remember, many will let so much slip just from casual conversation. Our guards are down, and our words convey truth. Even one such as myself has slipped up every now and again, which is why I lie commonly, or misspeak a common turn of phrase. Or do I? The Black Hand, in all of its forms, strive to be something influential in the world. A sect in lower number, and while they'll let you think that's through their choice, I have never seen one of them pass up the opportunity to grow and expand the second it's available to them. Despite their operations and shadowy demeanor, they are little different from you or I. They are not this secret, all-powerful Illuminati who rule the world from the shadows. They are just another kindred. The Illuminati is a different group entirely. Although you will have to wait a long while before you are ready to discuss them. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good night.